There's this misconception that musicians play music, but they don't really build their own instruments. I find this kind of odd, simply because most musicians I know of play Ableton, for example, and build their own instrument by creating a rack, for instance, putting a bunch of things one after another, tweaking them, and maybe using a microcontroller to control them with MIDI, right? Familiar? What I'm trying to say is, what if you would take it a step further and really build your own physical instrument the way you envision? If you're missing that sound, that you're like, I really need to get this particular sound, how can you make that happen? And today, it's possible to do it because of technology, because you can just take an Arduino or learn what an op amp is and create some sort of a distortion and realize, oh, this is actually not rocket science. Ding! Today's conversation is with Archil. And Archil started 3 years ago as a musician deciding I'm going to build my own instruments. And then he built this, and this, and this. And I could go on like this because he has been quite productive. Archil is really, really interesting because he started as a musician and built his own stuff because he felt like there is a need for me to get to my own sound. I need to maybe build this thing. And I'm just going to tinker a little bit, read a little bit online, ask some people for feedback and ask some questions and get to where I have my own thing. Soon enough, people started asking him if he could actually produce this for them so they could have his instruments, which is... Without further ado, I'm Roy, this is the Synth Academy, the Synth Design Podcast, and this is Archil.
Yeah, so I've been a musician for many years and music producer, so that's where I come from. But I think I started only 3 years ago to build music instruments. So I used to live in I still live in a small studio, but even smaller because in Paris rent is super expensive. So my bedroom was also my lounge, and I had this convertible sofa, and I had to open it every night and close it in the morning. And every time I would open it, there was those huge springs inside that would do this boom, boom, like super cool reverb sounds, a bit like in the reverb tanks, spring reverbs. And I thought, wow, really have to make an instrument with this. And I started looking at what had been done before and thinking about it. And there is some really cool things that were made before, but most of them were sort of noise boxes or that sort of things. And I wanted to try and make something that could be tuned and that could be used in a more harmonic way in music composition. And so I tried to tune them. So I just tried at first to get as many springs as I could and to get different notes and use a tuner and stuff. But first time I couldn't really make it. So first prototype I made was cool, but it wasn't tuned. And then I also added a lot of effects. So that was very interesting for sound design and stuff. And then, I don't know, over the next year, I tried more and I actually started making my own springs, and I managed to tune them on 2 octaves. And so now it's displayed like a piano keyboard by semitones. And yeah, and that worked. So I've made many different ones now. First ones were made of metal cases. Then we started experimenting with wood, different types of wood. And it went from a really rough making it into nicer wood making and nice details and everything.
Yeah.
And so that was my first, that's how I started making instruments.
Cool. So the inspiration came from that couch, and you mentioned that you actually designed your own springs?
Yeah, not at the very beginning, but because I wanted, so first one I made, I have it there, but
you can bring it if you want. That's nice to have a look. Yeah, sure. Or if you have a picture of it on the computer, we can have a look at that. Whatever is easier.
It's nicer to have the real.
Sure.
So this is heavy. this is the very first prototype I made. So you see it's not
beautiful.
tuned and it's quite rough, but I like it too. This is an old suitcase I found on a flea market. And yeah, so those actually are the original ones from my couch.
Oh,
the huge
really?
ones. Yeah. And then I started finding some on the streets because I'm always going around on my bicycle, like going to the studio and everywhere. So I'm always looking, and like whenever I see a couch on the street, I stop, and I always have like pliers in my backpack, and I just sneak all them.
Snatch them and just
Yeah,
look for different kinds of
snatch the
springs.
And then there was a second one that was nicer, but I don't have it here anymore. And then I made this one. So this is the first tuned one.
Mm-hmm.
So you see like a keyboard. But I really liked it. But then I thought, oh, it'd be cool to have it one octave lower to be able to play bass, actually, bass lines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started designing my own, well, not designing, but like making my own springs because I couldn't find big enough ones. And then I made this one. So here you can see like that much bigger. And that was actually quite complicated. I got a metal rod in a DIY shop, and I put it at the end of a, what is it called? A drill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I got some piano wire.
Yeah.
And zzz, and you make your springs like that. But it's
Really?
super long. It's, well, not super long to make, but it's difficult to have it like very regular. Very often it's gonna start like messing around.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why.
So then you actually need to measure the how do you do that? Like, I'm sure there is some math to it, right?
Yeah, at the beginning it was very empirical. I don't know if you see it like that. And then I could derive a formula, and it's not like 100% exact, but now I've made a lot of notes and I know exactly how to tune them. But still, it's very, very long because it has to be super precise. It's like 0.5 millimeter of spring, and then it's out of tune. So it's still a very, very long and tedious process. So I make them, and then I make my loops at the end, and then I test it. And then if it's too high or too low, I have to cut a bit with a plier and then remake a loop a bit different. And so it's still a long process.
Is there any video where you show this process somewhere online?
Nope.
No.
No, not yet.
I think this can be really interesting. I don't know. I don't know any. How did you come up with the technique to create it? Is it something you saw online, or you just like you really had to come up with the whole thing on your own?
No, I just tried different things, and because at first I thought it was going to be the tension, like on a guitar string.
Yeah. That
would change the note, but it's not actually. It's just about how much material you have and how many spirals.
Spirals. Yeah. So how many spirals and what is the thickness of the material? This would define the tuning.
The diameter of the wire itself and the diameter of the spring too, of each coil. That's the word I was looking for. But then tension doesn't really change anything. Which is also cool because it means in the long term you don't need to have a tuning mechanism.
Yeah.
It just stays. I've been making them for 2 years, so I don't know. Maybe in 5 years they'll be out of tune, but I don't think so. So far, it remains pretty much in tune.
Is there a difference in the timbre of an old vintage spring and a new one?
Good question, because the ones I used for tuning, the only old ones I use are for not tune ones, like the sofa ones, like the huge, you can't cut them, so you can't really tune them. So all the ones I use for tuning are new, like either I make them myself or I buy them. So, but yeah, there surely would be some difference in the timbre, in the tone.
Yeah, interesting. What I saw, just giving a bit of context, you said you started about 3 years ago with this. Did you build any instruments before, or was it really the first time that you're building something?
As a kid, I grew up in the countryside, and I always loved building stuff, doing DIY. I was always in my basement doing stuff. And then as I grew up, when I got 18, you know, I went to London, like did my studies and all sort of stuff, but I was living more in cities like London and then Paris. And I don't know, in cities, it's not the same environment, and you're less into DIY, and I kind of forgot about it for a few years. And then I thought, oh, I'm really missing it, you know, like crafting things, like, and I think at that point I just did 1 or 2 DIY pedal kits.
Yeah.
Maybe just one. Yeah, actually it's here. It's very simple reverb.
Oh yeah.
From a digital reverb anyway. And yeah, after that the springerphone was the first one.
Right.
It's actually, that was that magical moment when I thought, shit, I love doing DIY and I'm a music producer and I'm always looking for new sounds. And then when I suddenly thought about, mixing those two aspects.
Yeah.
It seems obvious, but I don't know. I never really thought about it before. I guess I was more into traditional synth and instruments, and I just didn't really know that community, or I don't know. Now all my Instagram is just full of like crazy creators, and I feel like everyone is doing that, but it's just because I'm a bit more into that field. But I don't know, I guess 5 years ago I was just like into regular bands and keyboards and guitars. So I never really thought about it before.
Yeah, it seems that things it's like the more the internet like we just grow, smaller and smaller communities are becoming more substantial because of the internet. So things like this, like 3 years ago could have been like non-existent, and it might be that if you make now a video of you showing how you create a spring, it's going to get a lot of views just because there are no videos about this. And then all of a sudden someone takes it to a whole new level. Like I can't even think about something like this, but it seems like you took it to a whole new level by just saying, I could actually tune these. And I'm sure it wasn't that easy to do it at first. Like you had some assumptions, and obviously some of them were wrong, and then you got to the point where it actually makes sense and you managed to do it, which must have been a really a great feeling. I don't have the right word now. Yeah. I also saw that on your YouTube account, you actually have quite a lot of experimental, I wouldn't say very conventional sound design techniques. They are, I mean, they're known sound design approaches. Tricks, but they're not really it's not like you're just synthesizing everything on the computer. You're really doing sound design. Is this a new thing that you started afterwards, or is this something you did already before?
I think it kind of came up at this. I think it's quite recent. I mean, like 3 years ago, but at the same time, I had it like most producers. I think I did a few experimental stuff before and tried like some original techniques and stuff. But all the sound art approach and videos, I think, is pretty recent too, like from 3 years ago too.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it also really helped my music. When these two, it's like, it's amazing because all the time I spent making this instrument is then really, really helping my music career and my composition. And then I use them in the studio. So they both grow together, and that's brilliant. Then the idea is also to play live with them. So we haven't yet. I spend most of the time the past 2 years composing the studio, because these instruments at the beginning are kind of difficult to use in production. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you do experimental stuff, it's easy, or ambient. But our challenge with my friend Leon, we compose everything as a duo, is to make experimental pop. So it's still kind of pop in the structure and harmonic with and everything. So that's our whole challenge. So we kind of spent 2 years in the studio just experimenting, testing, and not releasing anything. And now we finally have an EP ready with a label and everything that is going to come up in a few months.
That's awesome.
And now we're gonna, yeah. So that's what I was gonna say. Now we're preparing a live show for whenever it's possible again.
Yeah, yeah. I also
But yeah, I
saw
think
that.
my approach. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah,
Go ahead.
just to finish on this,
Mhm.
I think my approach is, I don't think, maybe I will, but I don't think I would design a synth that is only electronics with nothing mechanical. I think because yeah, I like the poetic aspect of, I don't know, and also the visual aspect of something moving or using different elements for to make music with. Like I have a project that is not finished of making music with water.
Mhm.
I have another one which is a like mechanical sequencer where you have like 4 big wheels spinning, and of course the Poet Pilots, which
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking about later. I think is all about this, like motors and movements, vibrations, and everything.
Yeah. We're definitely going to go into the Poet. I'm curious about the vertical version of the springerphone, because I
Yep.
thought that this was an earlier version and then came the springerphone, but it's the other way
No.
around.
Yeah. It came later. It's basically just came from, one day I was in the flea market again, and someone was selling a lot of huge springs, and I was like, oh, I really need to do something with that. And I took all of them pretty much, and I thought about making a different one that would be more percussive, so having them vertically, and yeah, there it is. I don't know if you see
Yeah, I
it
see it there in the back. Yeah.
in the back. Yeah.
So this is just
So
part of the
it's a bit
experiment.
different. Like, yeah, that one is, it's way more percussive. It's more like to play drums or percussions on. On this version, I didn't put effects on it because I already had other ones with effects, so I just plugged them in.
Mhm.
But I can also make it with effects, like someone ordered it, I think last month. It's quite cool with the effects too.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
You
I
mentioned.
think it's got a bit less possibilities for sound design. I mean, I personally prefer the other one, but
Yeah. Is it because it seems like it makes a very aggressive bassy sound?
yeah, I think it can be really cool for techno or some sound design, of course,
Mhm.
but it's less versatile, I would say. And also, if you don't, how do you say that? I mean, all the springs are huge and they're always all vibrating together if you hit one. So it's cool because you have a huge natural reverb sound, but sometimes it can get a bit messy. So what I do sometimes is I put a cloth on some of them and just hit one,
Yeah. Internally, I'm curious. Do you have just one microphone?
Some of my earlier versions I used 2,
Mm-hmm.
but in the end I realized it was better to use just one. So it's mono, but then when it gets into the effects, it gets split into stereo, and some of the effects are stereo, like the delay and stuff.
Yeah. So there's actually no need to separate, like to create channels inside. You just need one microphone, and that is it.
Yeah, it's a piezo microphone and a piezo preamp that I make myself. Like I made a small PCB for it.
Cool.
And
And
because with piezos, if you don't have the right preamp with it, there's an impedance mismatch, and you get that pretty shitty sound that sometimes piezos are known for, where you don't have low end and it's just a bit like radio sound or whatever, like with a huge sort of filter sound on it. But if you get the right preamp, you can get a good sound.
That's good to know. Actually, I have never made anything with piezos, so I should look into that. But I know that I actually bought a couple of them. They're actually here, but I'm not sure if this is. I can imagine there's like completely different qualities of these. This is like just a cheap Chinese
That's
one.
what I used for the very first ones.
Yeah?
Yeah, they worked well. But then, and especially the first ones were not tuned and they were not that much into bass because, before I made the lower octave.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fine. But then for the new version, I make my own preamps and you get more low end and a more precise sound.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that you went to you studied in London. What did you
Mhm.
study?
Something totally different. I was doing economics and geography.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I was
I was
already doing music and playing in bands and stuff. So I had my band from back in France,
yeah.
and somehow we managed to remain together and play sometimes in London, sometimes in Paris, and still release some EPs and stuff. But yeah, I was doing that serious studies.
Cool.
But my plan, I guess, was still music somehow.
Yeah.
And then I went to Paris and got more into music, but I had a side job as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think 2 years ago, I could start to do only music and making my instruments.
Yeah. I wonder about your creative design process. So rather than, I mean, I can imagine that you're doing a lot of different things because you're also producing music and also with Leon. Then, if you would try to distill a week of working on an instrument, how would this look like?
Only the instrument design part, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say the basis of how I work is that at the beginning it's always, I just do it like I'm only doing it for myself and my needs and for what I would like to use it for in my productions and in the studio. So yeah, usually I do a first breadboard prototype. Well, it depends. I'm talking about for the Poet Pilot, for instance, but like for the springerphone, it would be different. But yeah, usually I do a first prototype, a rough prototype. I see if the principle works, and if so, I start designing a little more. It depends. If I do the interface, for instance, I'm going to use Illustrator and like quickly do a setup and sometimes print it just on paper and test it, see if it's efficient, like the size of the pads. If you can, just so I just play on paper and see if it seems cool to play.
Do you have a something like this printed next to you that you could show? Or is this?
I have one on my computer, but it's not printed. But I can show you.
Yeah, please do. I'm really curious how this looks.
Not this. This is one. This is actually not just paper because it's the next step where I just made a super rough prototype. So at first, that was not really clever, I think. At first, I just printed it on paper, just to try and see if the setup was good. And then I thought, actually, I just want to use it with the circuit I had laying around. And I started drilling just to add the knobs. And I added as well these tactile pads. So this is just copper tape, conducive copper tape that I cut and pasted in there. And then I soldered it beneath.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is one. So it's just my Illustrator design printed on standard paper.
Yeah, that was developed to a completely interactive device. I mean, this is how the Poet looks like at the moment.
Kind of, well, a bit better, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of the layout,
the design is pretty much this. Yeah.
Did you come up with more ideas that did not see the sun of light?
For this instrument, you mean, or different instruments?
For this particular one.
Oh yeah, sure. So maybe I should start about like how I came up with the idea and everything, or you just
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'm curious. Yes.
So how the idea of the Poet Pilot came in. So I think like 2-3 years ago, I bought myself a Coma fill kit, which is a wonderful instrument. I think I have it here somewhere. And I really loved it, and especially the solenoid driving part, solenoid and DC motor. And then quickly I started using only that, like in some of my productions. And soon after that, I thought, that's cool, but what if you could actually drive, I don't know, 8 or 12 of them and have an instrument only dedicated to that is standalone and really cool to use, and maybe with a bit more control. And then I also thought maybe you could drive other stuff. Like there's so many things that work with 12 volts. You could drive, I don't know, lights or fans, all sort of things. And then I started designing and thinking about that instrument. And I made a first breadboard prototype just to see if it would work with transistors and everything. And that worked. And so I was hesitating between 8 or 12 channels, but then in the end, I just chose 8 because I think that's really quite enough. And my first idea was to have it was just more basic. It was rectangular pads that would be lined up a bit like on a beat step from Archil or just on a lot of sequences with a knob on top of each pad. But then I thought, okay, if I want to have 8 of them, I don't know, the instrument is going to be kind of a bit long and rectangular and maybe a bit boring. And this is how the idea of the sort of triangular wave setup came in. And so, but I have, just wait a sec, I have my notebook with the first design. Thanks for holding on.
Sure, go ahead.
So this is on my notebook. I made this. And yeah, actually before printing the Illustrator thing, I made this one. And I showed it to Leon, especially because he's a drummer, so he knows.
Yeah.
And yeah, we tried. One of my constraints was that I wanted large enough pads so you could play with 2 fingers. Especially with solenoids, it's cool if you can make fast rhythms. But I thought that was cool because it was quite optimal in the use of space. And at the same time, in the width there, you have enough space to put 2 fingers.
Yeah.
And the other thing was that I didn't want, when you move from one pad to another, make sure the knobs wouldn't, block your fingers or anything. So I think the knobs are displayed slightly differently in the final version, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was first step. Then I made it into Illustrator to have it a bit nicer. Then I printed it on standard paper. Then I found some pizza cardboard or whatever laying around. I was just saying earlier that was not clever because it was like super shitty cardboard. It was just like not even firm. It was just like really flexible. Yeah. And then it ended up being my prototype for a few months because I didn't have time to make a better one. Yeah. So it was not even closed. It wasn't a box. It was just like that with all the electronics hanging at the bottom. And yeah, I think I used it in quite a few of my production compositions.
Funny.
And then I don't know, I think at some point I had a meeting with someone who wanted to see it. And I thought, okay, I have to make a nicer one. And so I got some plywood and made this one, but using the same circuit inside. So this is pretty simple. And again, it's the copper tape on top. And then it's drilled behind each pad and soldered there.
And each of them has two knobs or one?
One.
Yeah, okay. So that is an attenuator sensitivity.
Yeah. So depending on the motor, it's like speed or velocity, pretty much. Like for a solenoid, it's going to alter the velocity. And if it's a DC motor, for instance, it's going to be the speed.
Yeah. Really cool. And you also had the Roulettophone. Where is this coming in the last 3 years?
This is the cycling part. So I was always cycling and looking around at all the streets, trying to find some abandoned stuff and furniture. And I don't know, I started picking up wheels and I thought, oh, that could be cool actually to make an instrument. And for, I don't know, over a year, I collected all sort of wheels I could find on pieces of furniture. And then, after a year, I had enough to make an instrument. So I lined them up on some sort of wood casing, and I tried with a piezo and a preamp, and it sounded really cool actually, especially when you put it into effects.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, let me show you the original one here. Here it is.
That is crazy cool. I think this one in particular sounds really good. There is something in this in the movement and like acceleration that creates this particular sound that is a bit like you don't really know where to place it, what exactly it is. You always see it with a video, so it's like right away you understand what it is. But I think that if you just listen to it in a production, it's quite unique.
Yeah, what you say is interesting because actually we've used that in our EP, for instance, in some of our tracks. And sometimes I ask people, who listen to the track, and if they don't, usually they don't know I've used the Roulettophone. And if you don't tell them, they don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's funny.
That's pretty cool. So it seems like you're designing for yourself, pretty much.
Yeah, I would say maybe the Poet Pilot it was for myself at first, but then I thought, okay, what if I went one step further and made a more of a real product with it? Mm-hmm. And then I got into PCB design and making a nicer product. Because the springerphones at first were really for me, and then I made some Instagram videos and stuff, and I started having people like really enjoying that and asking me, can I order one and stuff? And then I thought, oh, okay, why not? I spend so much time and money making them and researching. Why not sell a few to some other people? And that's also so cool when you have someone else using that like in a different continent in his music. That makes me so happy. So I thought, okay, why not? But at the beginning, it just changes the process because especially me, at the beginning, I was just using stuff from the streets. And then suddenly, if you have to make 3 times or 5 times or 10 times the same instruments, you can't really do it in the same way because you're not going to have the same strings. Or if you do, it's like it takes hours and you can't really be sure you'll be able to deliver one and everything. So I had to change a little bit the process for that.
Yeah. So
and
what does it take?
Also,
what does it take to take something that you are just making for yourself, which I can imagine is much easier? As you said, you don't really need to reproduce it. So it's like whatever it is, that's how it sounds. What does it take to take it from here and become a small manufacturer? Even if it's 10, it's still like you are a manufacturer of a certain instrument.
I would say what was the most difficult was, sourcing the right components and sorting the components, and mainly the aesthetic part. Actually, that's what takes the longest. That's maybe that shouldn't be, but for instance, all my first instruments, I was just using like cases from flea markets or wine cases or all sort of stuff. And then suddenly you have to make something that always needs to have the same measurements pretty much. And that needs to be reliable and maybe to look a bit more professional and less like you just found it on the street. And then to do that, I started working with someone in Paris, a woodworker that is really good. And he's the one who made the springerphones with me. So we experimented with different woods, some ash woods, and more recently with solid oak wood.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy because it looks amazing, but it also sounds totally different. So and that was a lot of time of, first designing, 3D designing. It meant I had to learn using a lot of new softwares, spending a lot of time with him to make different prototypes. You had to rethink a lot of things. And suddenly like things you would just do. I think in the past, if it was just for me, I could just like take a drill and be, okay, one spring's going to be there and put it there. And then suddenly you had to be a more advanced process, more designs, more plans, and that's super interesting as well, because it kind of takes it one step further, but it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm happy I did it. And then for the poet pilot, yeah, I said I wanted to go one step further too by getting into PCB design, because it means you save a lot of time. Because before that, I was like assembling everything, like just.
That is just crazy.
It also means you can sell them a bit cheaper, because like making a springerphone takes me like between 3 and 5 days.
Yeah.
So it's impossible if you, especially because it's not my full-time job, because I'm also composing music and I want to keep doing that. So the idea of the poet pilot as well was to do something like slightly faster to make and more professional looking and everything. Yeah. So it was very long to design, but then I think it's a bit easier to produce once you get the final version of the design.
Yeah. So what's the next? What's on your bench at the moment? What are you working on?
To be honest, I've been really into the poet pilot because I released it only 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to be building and delivering the first batch this month. So I've launched the production of the PCBs in the factory. Yeah. Now I'm working with a woodworker as well to make the final version. It's almost there, but maybe we're gonna make a few adjustments. Maybe changing 1 or 2 components as well, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And so it's like full production mode these days.
Yeah, that and some music as well. I'm composing.
Yeah.
If you want to see, this is the final version.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's a bit hard to see with this, but
it's a bit dark, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'll ask for some nice pictures afterwards. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. I wanted to. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm really curious to see your studio because it seems like.
Yeah, sure. I have my sound card plugged, so I can't move too much. But a little bit. I hope it's not going to unplug. Right.
I'm curious how you separate the space between music production. I'm assuming you are doing music production in the same room.
Oh no, actually, this is my music studio, but I don't make the instruments here.
Right.
Because this is a basement, and if I can, I love to have some daylight. So when I'm doing my instruments, usually I do it at home. Okay. It's not optimal for now because I still live in a small flat, so it's sometimes kind of on my bed, or it's not the best. But okay, I'm probably going to move out soon, and maybe hopefully have a proper workshop at some point with all my tools nicely displayed and stuff. So yeah, this is just my music studio, but most of my finished instruments are here. So yeah, like recently I made that big wall thanks to some friends who gave me the idea and like made the plans, and then I built it myself. It's really cool because it's modular. You can just move the pegs and put some instruments or shells anywhere.
Very cool.
So yeah, you see springerphone there, the verticalist, some instruments from Asia and Africa. And then actually most of them are on the ground because I just showed them to you and put them there. But usually they're on this wall too. Then a Prophet, and this is Polyvox. And
what's there in the back?
The instrument. This?
Yeah.
This is the instrument I'm talking about with water. And this is something I'd love to finish because it's working, but one part is not. I need a bit more time to adjust something. But basically you can play music with water. So you control it with MIDI, and you can play with a keyboard, and each note is connected to a well, anyway, you can each time you press a note, you have one drop coming down.
Yeah. And
then you have this part is not there at the moment because that's what I'm working on. But at the bottom, I made a sort of glockenspiel.
A what?
with
Sorry. Oh, a glockenspiel. Yeah.
glockenspiel with some copper tubes,
Mm-hmm.
pipes, copper type pipes,
Yeah.
from plumbing.
Yeah.
And but so it works, like the whole mechanism works, and it's really cool. You have these nice sounds, so you can play either like drop by drop and do like arpeggios, like and visually it's very interesting because you have the water, it's like controlling the rain basically.
Wow.
And then you have a sort of reservoir at the bottom,
Yeah.
that gets the water, and then a pump that sends it back up to the tank, the original tank at the top. And the only problem is that the solenoids are very noisy.
Mm.
And so each time you open them or close them, you have a click, click sound. So that's why I made a big wood casing to try and soundproof it.
Mm.
It works a bit, but you still hear a bit of the click. And of course, the click is not, it comes before the drop touches the instrument. So it's not even at the same time. You have click, ding, click, ding. Well, a bit faster, but pretty much.
Okay.
And so to try and solve this problem, I made a huge sort of piezo multipair, like 13 of them, and made them waterproof to be able to put like one piezo on each pipe for each note.
Yeah.
But even then, that's the thing is, when you put a piezo on the pipe, it really attenuates the resonance because it can't really vibrate anymore.
Mm.
So what I did was to put them at the node of the vibration, where it's put on its. But even then, that's the sound is not good enough. So what I have to rethink the whole thing. I kind of know what I need to do, but I don't have time to do it for now. So it's almost there, and actually what I'd love to do in the future is to add it as a module of the Poet Pilot, because you could definitely drive this with a Poet Pilot.
Yeah.
But do something much lighter, much simpler, and where you would just have 8 solenoids like that, and maybe an easy, like, flexible tank.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that the solenoids need to be silent, and that's very, very hard to find.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. I have this, and then on the bench, that other sequencer I'm working on that is almost finished, but I didn't have time to refinish it either.
Sequencer, you didn't mention it.
It's a huge mechanical sequencer. So you have like 4 wheels that are spinning with a chain and everything, and then you can choose the speed and the ID. It's kind of a different take on the Poet Pilot. It's just making electromechanical music, well, mainly percussions with this one, where you have like 16 steps, like on a drum machine. Well, it's hard to explain if you don't see it. But...
Yeah, but that's okay. I think that maybe it's good to look at the sketches that you just showed me just earlier, because you went really quickly through a drawing that I saw at the beginning, and I was curious about this drawing as well.
Yeah, let me show you again. This.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was the original idea and drawing for the Poet Pilot. So as you can see, or maybe you can't read because it's not that obvious, it's flat, but it was supposed to be a pyramid-like shape. Well, this is even rougher. I think I made this one on my phone on an app. I don't know. I had that fantasy even I had it for the Poet Pilot as well. Instead of having just a flat rectangular case, I wanted to make it like a pyramid. And we tried already for the springerphones, but it just made a lot of things more complicated for the wood making. So even for the Poet Pilot, we abandoned the idea for now, at least. But then you see, it was quite close to what I did in the end, except the paths were linear and rectangular.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, these are 2 solenoids, 1 vibration motor and 1 DC motor.
Mm-hmm.
So usually I attach some, you can attach all sort of things to them and then play on either conventional instruments or all type of objects. Yeah, got MIDI in, MIDI through. Actually, no, it's MIDI out, MIDI in, MIDI out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe if you want, I can talk a little bit about the process of designing the PCB, because that was the huge challenge on this project because I had never done it before.
That's also really interesting. You can also share your screen. I think that is actually very interesting also for me, because I did a couple of PCBs myself, but I'm not an engineer. I'm a designer, so I come from a completely different perspective, and I had to learn all these programs that are like, oh my god.
Yeah, I feel you.
Which
show
program?
You the software.
Sure, you can just share your screen and show the schematic and the PCB if you're comfortable with it.
Of course, let me just open it.
Is it EasyEDA or Eagle, or what are you using?
Yep, exactly, EasyEDA.
Yeah, me too.
So maybe a bit of background story. So yeah, when I started thinking about the Poet Pilot, at first I wanted to do it like a bit like the first prototype, like all wood, and just have some squares cut into copper and like stuck on top. But then I thought it was quite complicated and maybe not the best to make. And then I thought, oh, actually, maybe it makes way more sense to have the touchpads included into the circuit and into the interface by having them on top of a PCB. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know much about PCB design and interfaces and stuff. And so I saw on Instagram a lot of instruments that I really liked. For instance, Mengchi. I know you know him, and I love his instruments. So I asked him because I couldn't really figure out. I wasn't sure if on his instruments, the interface was actually the PCB, or if it was just, an aluminum interface and the PCB was beneath.
Yeah.
So I asked him, and he super kindly replied like straight away and told me kind of the materials he was using and stuff. And then I asked another person, I asked Mario from Phonic Bloom. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
He's been like super, super nice. And I think he's the one who told me about EasyEDA, because I didn't really know what software to use. I was thinking of maybe KiCad or Eagle. Mm-hmm. And then he told me about EasyEDA. And so I started designing the whole thing that I'm going to show you. And then at the end, I was a bit afraid. I was like, surely I have made some mistakes, because that's a whole new process. And especially with the thing of using it as an interface with the pads, and that wasn't the easiest to start with. So before sending it into production, and to avoid wasting too much time and money and getting frustrated, I asked Mario, would you like to actually check my design? And he's been like super, super nice, and he checked it and he found a few mistakes and gave me a lot of tips. Yeah. And then I changed it and he checked again. So that's been like super, super helpful. Thank you, Mario, if you see this.
Hopefully he will.
Yeah. Wait, let me open the project and show my screen.
Yeah, side note about reaching out to people, I have to say that I've been doing a bunch of like interviews with people before I started with this little community of synth and instrument designers, and I have to say that there is really a big difference between how nice people are in this community. Like, you can just reach out to anyone. They'll be like, yeah, sure, let's just plan a conversation, let's do it. And like, yeah, it's really nice to see people so open to share knowledge and just spare time and talk to someone they don't know. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I've been really amazed. Like, you can just reach out to anyone, and people are super kind. And yeah, that's very, very cool. And thanks also for organizing these workshops. Like, last time I really loved it, and it was so cool to talk about other people. The thing is, it's quite a niche, I don't know if you say that, niche field. It's not many people do that, and sometimes it's quite lonely. So it's amazing when you can suddenly be in a virtual room full of people doing the same thing and super
Definitely,
passionate about it.
we are going to do more of these. I'm just trying to set things up, and summer is also coming now, so I'm gonna have a bit more time because schools are it's summer break, so we'll have a bit more time, and then we're going to try to create a few more activities for everyone. This was a lot of fun for
Oh,
me as
yeah,
well. I
cool.
really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Please do. So sorry. Share the screen. Right, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the schematics. So yeah, for people who don't know, you first have to design your schematics before you can get into the other part of the design, which is the PCB design. And then this is the final version. Wait, you don't have all the layers there. Yeah, this is it. So yeah, that's it. The big challenge with it, at least for me, was first that I was going to use SMD components, and that was totally new for me as well, because all my past prototypes was just with through-hole components. But here, because I was using the interface, the PCB as an interface, it meant all the components had to be at the bottom, and of course, it couldn't be through-hole. And also meant I had to find equivalents of all the components I was using. Yeah, and it was a bit of a challenge for the potentiometers, because at first, in my first prototypes, I used ones that are, mounted on top, but that was pretty shitty because you could see the mechanism at the top, so it wasn't really nice. And also, I don't know, I didn't really like the feel of these parts, and they were not that reliable.
Yeah.
So between prototype 1 and 2, I took a lot of time to find a way out, and in the end I found a trick where I could use kind of standard potentiometers with solder lugs, and I managed to bend them, and that's why I designed those huge pads. These are like custom shapes that I made to be able to use those big potentiometers.
Yeah, I see. So basically, the potentiometer is coming from the back, and then the legs are bent to be soldered to the back.
Yeah.
So
these potentiometers, they're not meant to be used in this manner. You're just meant to solder like wires to the solder lugs.
Yeah.
But by bending them, I realized they could be flat, and you could actually have this at the back of a PCB, and it works. It's no conventional way of doing it, and
yeah. I think that's actually pretty clever.
I think it's fine.
And I see that you also managed to get your logo in there, which I found really challenging with Easy EDA.
Yeah, I struggled. Yeah, that was so frustrating at first because you put it, and that's the logo.
It messes it up, and you're like, "But why? Just put it the way it is."
Yeah, especially because it's supposed to be vectorized, so I couldn't get it. I was like, "Why? Like, why is it transforming it?" And I don't know, I went into some forums, and I don't know, I think maybe Mario gave me some tips as well. I can't remember. Yeah, I think the tip for that, if some are interested, was in Illustrator to kind of export it, but huge, in like ×4 or something like that, like much, much bigger than the real size. And then importing it into Easy EDA, and then you get, say, higher quality. I think that was the way around.
So you make it really large, and then you import it the same size, and you scale it down?
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm not entirely sure, but I think, I made a ×4 or something. That's an option you have in Illustrator when you export, to have like ×4 or something.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. And I also see just a small note about user experience. You actually have their signifiers at the top. Like if you zoom in.
Yeah. It's funny because we talked about that in the workshop. Actually, that's some of the improvements between the version 1 and version 2 of my PCB.
Yeah.
And actually, it's fun because all the pictures on my website and videos and stuff of the Pod Pilot are actually the previous prototype, but people are going to receive a nicer version because I added this and indications about MIDI in, MIDI out. Which
you can maybe zoom a little bit in so people can see it. I think it's a bit hard to see from here.
At the top.
Yeah. This is also something that Electron is doing really well. If people know the Digitone, for instance, or Digitact, they always indicate at the top as well. I think that also Arturi is doing it. Some really large brands are doing it. Instead of just indicating in the back, as if someone always then you require people to turn the instrument to see what it is. And like this, you can just like keep the instrument the same way and just put it in.
Exactly. I think that was my original plan, to just engrave it in the wood or something in the back. Yeah. But first, it's much more convenient, as you say, to have it on top, so you don't have to look at the back. But also production-wise, it's much easier to do it like this instead of adding a process of engraving the wood at the back, especially on this side. It's kind of more difficult to get it into a machine or anything. But that was much better. So I had that question, of how much information you should give, because in the end, this is a pretty simple instrument. Like you don't have plenty of controls and sub menus and everything. So I thought, okay, do I need to put, like, are people going to figure out that the first pad is motor 1 and first knob on top is the same motor, or do I need to write down, 1, 2, 3, 4? Because I also like the kind of minimalist design.
Yeah.
But you never really know, like, what is obvious for you because you made it, if it's going to be obvious for other people too. So, and then, I thought it was at least good to add it for the plugs, but I didn't add any information on the pad themselves, but I think that should be fine. But then, MIDI in, MIDI out, that was really needed, I think, because you can't really know which one is in and which one is out otherwise. One interesting tip that Mario gave me actually about PCB design is that my original design was the same, except there wasn't any of these stars. So it was like plain black, a matte black background and those big gold squares. And he told me, because some of his instruments are kind of the same, with an interface made of a PCB with matte black and gold inish. And he told me, like, actually in production, a lot of his PCBs got a scratch. So he received, I don't know, he told me a proportion, maybe like 30% or something of his PCBs got already scratched when he received them. So he gave me the tip of having more complicated designs and like finer details, so that in case you get some marks, you don't really see them that much. So, and then the idea of the starry sky came in, and that's cool because it also, I think, improves a lot. It makes it look a lot.
So I'm not really sure I understand. What was scratching?
The PCB.
Yeah. So
during the manufacturing process, it got some scratches. And so he basically told me, if you have like a huge area of matte black or just like plain gold surfaces, you're very likely to receive it with some scratches and dents. So he told me one trick to get around this is to have some like geometric designs. And I think on his pads, like most of the time, or piano keyboards and stuff, he had some, one of them I think he's got like really nice Japanese patterns.
So by adding more detail, can you show the 2D, just press the 2D version to see how this looks like without all these layers?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I was just thinking the 2D like. Oh,
just the photo, you mean?
Yeah, if you just press the 2D under the route and tools at the top.
Oh, that, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Wait.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, now it's clearer. Right. So actually, you added you added some texture over it.
Yeah, this is on the solder mask layer. So basically some
Really
little
cool.
dots are etched. And then this is basically the negative of it on the pads. That was a
Super
bit
cool. This is
long to find a way to do it. But yeah, so it looks like a starry sky, and I love the randomness of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's beautiful.
And I think it also matches the, I don't know, the name of it, Poet Pilot, and also my aesthetics. I don't know if you've seen my website, but I'm not into dark stuff, magic and starry skies and whatever. So thanks, Mario. Great tip. So far I've been lucky. I didn't really get scratches on my PCBs anyway, but even in the long term, especially an instrument like this, which is tactile, you're gonna get a bit of like finger marks and everything. So it's always cool to not see the tracer that much.
I think you can also ask them to put paper separations between the different PCBs. This might help as well.
Did they actually? Yeah, I think they do already, so they don't get scratched.
Cool.
During shipping.
Yeah, you can stop sharing the screen. I think we have so much information here to show with people. I think that this was remarkable. Just to give you some context, when I started doing these interviews, this was like a few months ago, and I just planned to use them as like cut pieces off of them and put them in the video course I'm working on. But then I realized this is super nice, and no one really talks, like no one interviews. I mean, even if people interview people like I don't know, someone from Arturia, for instance, they would just ask them like general questions, and I wanted to get these dive-in conversations for like super nerds. and then I thought I actually have all these conversations. I should just release them. And now you're actually the first one that I'm doing. So I have now already 10. I'm not really sure when I'm going to put yours in the schedule, but this is really the first one that I'm doing, as this is going to be a podcast. Secondary, it's going to be added to the course. But yeah, so it's super nice. I'm really happy that we had a chance to talk, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks a lot for having me. And yeah, same for me. It's the first time I'm doing this, and I consider myself a beginner in that field, and I'm really happy to be joining that community and to have so many nice people around helping. And so I'm happy to share a little bit of what I've learned.
Definitely. I think the creative process in general is now like a newbie, like saying that you have less experience. It's kind of funny because you're like, I've been doing this for the past 3 years. And if you think about someone with maybe 15 or 20 years of experience, you're like, yeah, you just started. But at the same time, you look at something that someone with 3 years of experience can produce, and you're like, this is crazy. The amount of stuff we can actually learn and the amount of services that are available for us to create stuff is just remarkable. We can just tap into this knowledge, ask some people for help, and develop and build small communities that can really support one another to create brilliant projects like the ones that you're making. Yes. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. I'll see you in the next workshop.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Rory.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.